Yo, what's going on guys? It's Daniel and this is Tech Tuning, and today we're working on something different from a Toyota for once. We have a 2017 Mazda 3 that we're going to be replacing the front control arms on. So without any further ado, I'm going to start walking you guys through the process on how to get that done. So all the things that we're going to be taking apart to get to this is going to be pretty straightforward. The main thing we'll start with is this plastic shield that's in the way. You'll see there's two pop clips at the bottom, the top, and then you'll have to take out this one to peel this side back, and you'll see there's one more here and there's one more back in this corner. Once you have that shield out, there's going to be a 19mm bolt right behind here on the subframe, and then underneath there's going to be two more 19mm bolts. You're going to have the one here and one behind it, and then you'll also have to disconnect this front tie rod link right here, which is going to be a 17mm and a pin. And then coming underneath at the lower ball joint is going to be a 14mm clamp style that's going to go over the ball joint, and we'll have to take that off as well. What I'm going to start with next is going to be removing the three 19mm bolts on each side. Those ones are connected to our front subframe and chassis. So just to reiterate, we have one right here, which there should be enough space to fit an impact. If it's too tight, you might want to use a ratchet and just use a breaker bar on top of that to get it all the way off. And then we have the two underneath here that you should be able to just use an impact on as well. Alright, so we got this one loose. It was pretty difficult, but we're going to finish taking this one off, and then we're going to switch to the other ones. To get this one off, I could fit the impact into the wheel well here, but honestly, even at full blast, it wasn't getting it. So wound up switching to a full-sized breaker bar, and we use that to break it loose. So now, like I said, we're gonna get it all the way off and keep moving on. Now moving on to the two underneath, like I said, there's one in the front and then there's one right behind that. I'm going to try and break these loose by hand first with the bar again, and then we'll use the impact to take them the rest of the way off. Okay, so now we have all three of the major 19s out. Next, I'm gonna disconnect this tie rod here. That way we can get better access to the lower ball joint connector. So now that we can twist the entire assembly, we can see our last 14mm down here, which is a nut and a bolt. These were pretty tough to get off and put back on when we did the original side on the passengers. So you have to have a little bit of patience with this. We sprayed it with a lot of WD-40, and you may need to use a couple of different tools. To break it loose, the best bet is probably going to be either using another wrench or a ratchet with a breaker bar. You can try the impact, but we didn't have much success with that. So I'm going to give that a go, and we'll see how we can get it off. So after another tough battle, we got this bottom ball joint bolt out. Hopefully you guys don't have to deal with this the way that I did, but the only way I could manage to get it out was by using the impact on the bolt side once we had taken the nut off the other side, of course. And then I hooked a pry bar underneath the inner side of the axle, and as you can see, it lines up with that bolt. I was pushing down on the end of the bolt with the pry bar as I used the impact to force it towards the impact as I was loosening it. Doing this with a very generous amount of WD-40 helped me to get it out without much ease. And now what we should be able to do is we should be able to pull the entire control arm assembly out from underneath the car, and then using either a hammer or a dead blow, we can hit it until this lower part drops out and the entire thing comes loose. Alright, so with the old arm out, you can see why we were doing this job, because these lower ball joints are completely cooked. So now with everything disassembled, we're going to get back to putting the new stuff in. So before we start reassembling, I'm just gonna take the time, and with all of the bolts we just took out, I'm gonna put some anti-seize on these. That way, if we ever have to come back to this for any reason, a little bit easier to get out than they were this first time around. And then once these are anti-seized, we'll start by lining up the two body parts of the lower control arm, and then we will also put on the lower ball joint portion back onto the bottom of the strut. There we go. So after playing with it for a little bit, we have this lower control arm loosely fitted in. The lower ball joint point isn't fully connected, but I have it just kind of slipped in so that we can get everything else lined up. Those 2 points are lined up, so we're gonna put the bolts into those, and then I'll show you the trick we figured out to getting the ball joint fully seated in place. So we've gotten all the major connection points tightened all the way back up. And before we get to this last point, I'll show you guys that it's pretty hard to get it popped all the way in. As you can see, it's not all the way there just by hand. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna borrow the jack right here, and we're gonna place it right underneath the bottom of the lower control arm, and make sure that you have like a rubber ball or something there just to keep it from being full contact. And we're gonna use that, and we're gonna push the lower control arm all the way up so that it pops that last bit into place. So as you can see, using the jack to our advantage, we're able to pop the lower ball joint piece right back into the connector at the bottom of the front knuckle. And now we just have to put that bolt back through, tighten it up, and we'll get back to putting this back on, and then that should be it. I just hope it's the right one. What were you saying? Call it what you will. Forgot one last thing, and that's just putting the splash shield back on. We're just gonna throw those clips and that thing back in, and then we're done. It's Korean too. I have a friend from Korea. Alright guys, so that will wrap up doing this job. As you guys saw, it's pretty straightforward. You just have to pay a lot of attention to adjusting the control arm and getting it to line up with the bolts. But once you do that, everything should fall into place. That trick with the jack to get the ball joint to line into place was also really useful, so that's another good thing to keep in mind. But hopefully that was pretty straightforward for everyone. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.